Hello and welcome back to the Intuitive Writer podcast. I'm your host, apocalypse author Camille Peacock, and here on the Intuitive Writer podcast, I share a sneak peek at my latest work in progress and share my personal intuitive writing process with all of you. I am a medium and a story channeler, and I love to come on the show and share my stories with all of you. So thank you for being here. Last week on the show, we talked all about the Book of Mary, and this is the second book in the Jesus Christ Zombie Killer series. I shared a lot of cool stories in that last episode, one of my favorites being Mary and Yahweh's favorite love song. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely recommend going back to listen to episode 32. Now today on the show, we're going to be taking a new direction. I thought I was going to be talking more about the Book of Mary, but we are completely switching gears today, and we're going to be talking about Zommunist Invasion. And for those of you on the podcast, that's the series up there in the upper corner. And the basic premise is Cold War, 1985. For those of you over the age of 40, everybody remembers the Cold War and how scared everybody was that the Soviets were going to drop nukes on us. So in this series, the Soviets do invade, but they deploy a zombie virus instead of nuclear weapons. So that is the premise of the story, and that's the series that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to start at the beginning. If you had talked to me at the beginning of 2021, I would have told you with unwavering certainty that my main writing project for the year was going to be finishing the Zommunist Invasion series. I've seen 5 books for the series, and I was hell-bent and on a trajectory to finish all of them in 2021. And what's interesting, I got through book 3, and when I started writing book 4, the next one in the series, something really unusual happened. And I've talked about this a little in other episodes, but I'll recap briefly for those of you that haven't listened to the earlier episodes. I started writing book 4, and inspiration just turned off. The faucet turned off. And what happened was the story of Jesus Christ Zombie Killer really wanted to come through. It muscled everything out, and despite my best intentions and my own certainty, I realized that I was not going to be working on Zommunist Invasion 4, and in fact I was going to be starting a brand new series. So that's what I've been doing for most of the summer. Is I wrote that book, published it in August, and so now we come full circle, and here I am once again talking about Zommunist Invasion. So what happened was I was working on the Book of Mary, the second book in the Jesus Christ Zombie Killer series. And around the time that I started working with it, I received a cover redesign for Zommunist Invasion from my designer. This was a cover that I had commissioned. After some careful thought, I decided it was time to rebrand the covers. I absolutely love the covers that they have now, but what I realized is that as a thumbnail on Amazon, on a very crowded screen, the books compete with a lot of other stories, and it didn't jump out as an apocalypse story. There's some branding cues that I missed in the original design of the cover. So I decided that I wanted to revise it and really take advantage of some apocalypse branding cues so that visually, as readers are scanning the page, my book will really jump out as an apocalypse story. So I'm in the middle of rebranding the entire series, getting new covers done, and I got the very first cover for book 1. And it was so beautiful. It took my breath away. I just love it. I can't wait to share it with you guys. If you're in my Patreon group, I've already revealed it to my Patreon members, so they're the only ones that have seen it so far. And what happened is, as soon as I got that cover, it was like, so imagine like up in Antarctica, if, I think, yeah, anyway. Imagine like great icebergs like starting to melt and crack, and water like bubbling up through all the cracks and starting to move and to flow. And that's what started happening with Zommunist Invasion. All of a sudden, I felt the energy of the story. It's almost like it resurrected. It was really, really interesting. All of a sudden, it was back after being dormant for months, right? Because here I was back in the springtime ready to write it, and like the faucet turned off. Like it just was gone. And I had to write this other book. And suddenly it was back. And it very much felt like, you know, the ice cracking and all of a sudden the water starting to flow, and I was starting to hear the characters and receive scenes, and I was surprised because I had recalibrated and made a new plan. I really love plans. My new plan was to try and get the first 2 books of Jesus Christ Zombie Killer out in 2021. Since I had started this new series, it was getting good feedback from readers, so I really wanted to keep up the momentum and write the second book. But I really started feeling Zommunist Invasion, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll try to write 2 books at the same time. How's that for an idea? That's normally something I don't do. It's just I have a really hard time working with really different energies and managing them both at the same time. It just doesn't work well for me. But I had to be honest with myself that I was really feeling Zommunist Invasion. And then I was actually starting to see it too. Sometimes I can see the energies that I'm working with. And it was big, and it was bright. It was like almost like this giant, like a spotlight or like a sunbeam coming down. I could see it. It was big. It was yellow, kind of a yellow gold color. And I'd be walking around the house, and I could actually like feel it like locking into me. I don't know, imagine like an alien spaceship with like the little beam floating around, right? And it locks onto you. Like it felt like that. I could feel it like locking in and snapping in. I was just like, oh my God, this is so big. It's so ready. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try and write in 2 different series at the same time. So I opened up my computer, and the story that I decided to write was the story of a character named Kozlovovitch. And he is a Russian researcher who defects to the US in the 3rd book. And the books have been out long enough that I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. There's a lot to uncover about him. But anyway, he has a very really specific, really fascinating origin story. This is going to be a novella. It's a shorter piece, and it's going to be a story that I'm just writing for my newsletter subscribers. So if your appetite is, or your interest is piqued by the time this episode is over, I definitely recommend you sign up to my newsletter, or even my Patreon, because my Patreon team's going to get it first. And yeah, so that was the first story from Zommunist Invasion that started coming through, this novella about Kozlovovitch, who I call Koz for short, K-O-Z. I think that's a really super cool name. And that's the story that started flowing through. Koz's story actually showed up a few months ago. So it had kind of been rattling around. I knew it was there. I knew it wanted to come in. And so I've talked before that I am a medium, and sometimes my characters, there is like an actual real soul behind them. And so when I opened my computer, I just said, Koz, are you ready? And like he showed up, like he was there immediately. I have an agreement with spirit in general that when someone shows up and they want my attention, the agreement I have is that they can touch me and let me know that they're here. That's my preferred way of communicating, my preferred way to be alerted. It's like their way of knocking on the door. And so what happened was when I asked, Koz, are you ready? Like I got like a big thumbs up, and he was here. And it feels very much like there's this cloak of energy like rippling around me. Sometimes like he would move through me. I could feel him passing through my body, rippling around me. Just imagine like having a blanket around your shoulders and like it moving all around. Like that's what it feels like. I was like, wow, okay. He's here and he's strong and he's ready to work. Sometimes I see them, not always. This time I could see Koz very clearly. older man, curly gray hair, glasses, on the thin side. Ironically, he looks nothing like that in the book. Sometimes characters are particular about how they look in a book. He wasn't. So the energy, the spirit that I'm working with looks nothing like the character, but that's okay. But yeah, he was very, very active. I was like, wow, okay, like this thing really wants to come through. Like he's really ready to work. So, okay. And so he was around very heavily for a few days. And I do a lot of times sit in meditation and I connect with the energy of the story, and it really helps me to see it, to feel it. And Koz would show up when I was doing that. And there was one time he showed up and like he sat in me. Sometimes they sit in me. It's really interesting. And I tried to get a little more information from him because sometimes it's interesting to know like what their story is. And all I got was like weird symbols. Sometimes communicating with spirits, it's not like talking on the phone to your friend. It's a little convoluted. Sometimes they use a different language, and he'd show me like weird things like a hammer. He showed me a mushroom, and I couldn't make any sense of it. But what he did share that was really profound was this emotion, this feeling, this vast, deep, bottomless hamster wheel of despair. And he was sitting with me, and he opened up, and I opened up, and I received this very heavy, heavy despair, and like I could feel it in my soul. Yeah, like I said, it was vast, it was bottomless. There was no way out, and I sat in it, and he let me feel it, and I was like, okay, like that's what we're working with. Like this is a really, really heavy energy. It's really heavy. It's going to be hard and a little bit scary, but okay, like I understand. And yeah, it's interesting how they can share emotions with me sometimes. I'm very sensitive. I'm very empathic to emotions of both living people and those not living. So anyway, I guess I just, I pick up and feel a lot of things. We're going to take a brief pause from our show. I just wanted to express my gratitude to all of you for being here and being part of the journey. Please like and subscribe to the Intuitive Writers Show on your favorite platform, whether that be YouTube or one of the podcast platforms. And if you are on YouTube, please hit that notification bell so you can be notified when new episodes go live. And if you'd like to support me, please consider buying and leaving a review of any of my novels, which can be found on Amazon and Audible. And also consider joining my monthly Patreon team. It's $5 a month. I host monthly live chats where you can join me and ask any questions that you'd like. And I also have other goodies that I post monthly for my members. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And let's get back to the show. So that was the beginning of my work with the character of Kozlovovitch. And one thing about writing for me, or creativity in general, is very much a spiritual practice. And when I say it's a spiritual practice, what I'm talking about, I believe that I am here as a soul in this human body to grow and expand my soul. I'm here to learn how to hold more love for all living things. I'm here to learn how to hold more compassion for all living things. And to just grow and become brighter and to become more filled with love. And my writing is very much a part of that process. When I let it lead me, when I don't fight it, when I let it lead me, I am carried to my lessons. I'm carried to my lessons of spiritual growth. And what's interesting is I'm sharing this Zommunist Invasion story. When we back up to last spring, where I was, channeling the story of Zommunist Invasion 4, it switched off, and what turned on was the Jesus story. And I fought it. I wasn't in surrender. I did finally throw in the towel and fully embrace the Jesus story. But learning that trust and surrender was a lesson. And it's interesting because the same lesson came back. And I do believe that as we integrate lessons into our life, as the universe teaches us and helps us grow and expand, the lessons do repeat themselves. So personally, as I struggle to integrate certain things, surrender is something I really struggle with. But it's something I'm being continually challenged to integrate. And so I keep getting presented with opportunities to do this, like to really surrender to the lessons and the teachings that want to come through for me. So I had almost this identical experience happen within a few months of each other. My grand plan, my human plan, getting completely derailed by spirit and by these energies that I work with, saying, no, that's not the path you're going to take today. That's not the lesson that you're being led to today. I have spoken extensively about working with the Jesus energy and how going down that path really healed this wounds that I had with Christ consciousness and Christianity. And now Jesus and Christ consciousness has become this like beautiful presence in my life, and it fills me with so much love and so much gratitude. And it's a complete opposite of where I was 6 months ago. And so that was a big part of that teaching, and it's a big part of why I was pulled down that path, because that was a teaching that I needed to integrate. And so it's interesting. So here we are again. I'm being asked to surrender. I did finally do it. I had to fight it for about a week because, yeah, anyway, we all get in our own way, right? So I fought it. I did finally surrender, and I began working with Kozlovovitch and his energy. And the cool thing, there very much is a give and take with spirit. And I always have a lot of gratitude for it. So when these spirits come to me, there's something that they need. It's always different. I don't always know what it is, but there's something that they need me for. There's a reason they want to come through the story. With Koz, there's this despair needs to be expressed, this deep, deep, vast, bottomless despair. This feeling that he shared with me. So I work with him, and then in turn, blessings flow back to me. I get to grow and expand from this experience. So I wanted to describe a little bit what happened this time around, and the blessing or the teaching, the expansion that I brought in as a result of working with this story. I wrote my first draft, and I knew Koz's character. He works for 40 years in Cold War Russia in a Soviet research lab. And I did a little bit of research into this, like it really did exist. And it's dark, one of the things I came across was they had this scientist who was trying to create a hellhound, a dog with multiple heads. And it was awful. He would actually surgically remove a dog's head from its body, and he'd graft it onto another dog. And it's just horrible. I mean, they had photos of it. Anyway, it's dark stuff, you guys. It's really dark. It's really heavy. And my character is going to be one of these researchers, one of these scientists doing these horrible things. And in the story, he does it for his entire life, for 40 years, his adult life. And when I wrote my first draft, I gave it to my husband, and he came back to me, and he's like, you made him sympathetic and likable. And he's like, your soul doesn't do this kind of work without either A, completely drinking the Kool-Aid and just being on board with it, or B, you lose your mind. You either lose your mind or you kill yourself. There's no middle ground. There's no way you can write a character that feels bad about doing these horrible things for 40 years and make him sympathetic, because he wouldn't survive. He's got to be all in. If he's got to drink the Kool-Aid and be all in with what he's doing. And I realized that yeah, I knew that because I'd done the research on the two-headed dogs and some of the other things, and it was awful, and I was afraid of it. I was afraid to go all the way into that darkness. I was afraid to let it flow through me because it's big and it's dark and it's scary. But as I was talking with my husband, like, I realized he was right. And what's interesting, I've mentioned this on other on other episodes, but energetically, my husband and I are a creative team, at least on the stories that I'm working on right now. What Spirit has showed me, they showed me a stool, a three-legged stool, and I am the seat on the stool and two of the legs, and my husband is the third leg. So energetically, he participates in the creation of these stories. And he's actually the one that brought me the Koz story. He was sitting on the sofa one day and he's like, you need to write this story. I was like, oh. And as soon as he said it, it was like he lobbed a potato to me. I caught it, I felt it, I held it, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, there's a story. So energetically, we work together to bring the stories in. I do the lion's share of the work, but he's part of it. Anyway, so it's very interesting. So yes, he's my content editor. And when he read the story, he's like, you missed it. He said it in a nice way, but yeah, he's like, you missed it. So I had to go back and I had to rewrite the whole thing. And I had to write this character that drank the Kool-Aid, right, of Cold War Soviet Russia propaganda. And the story just it was really, really dark and heavy. And when I got to the end, I was channeling it in, I was sitting in meditation, and Koz was showing it to me, and we were standing in front of a mass gravesite where test subjects, like dozens and dozens of test subjects, had been buried, and I could see, the dirt with the outlines of the bodies underneath it. And I just started to cry. It was just so much, the emotion. It was just so heavy. And I was sitting there, and Koz was sitting with me, and I realized that, I was crying his tears. He was really sad. And he was just expressing just this deep sorrow and this deep despair, and it was flowing out of my body as he was sitting here. And it was really beautiful. It was really sad. And I came away from that experience. My gift that I got, I guess, was more compassion and more love. So the gift and the teaching that I was able to integrate with the writing of the story was that even out of despair and darkness, compassion and love can still grow. And I was able to find that for this character. I was able to find the compassion and love for this darkness and this sadness. I very much hope you either sign up for my newsletter or join my Patreon and get a chance to read this story, because what I experienced is actually the theme of this story, of hope blooming out of despair and darkness. It's very much the theme, and it's going to be something that's going to be explored in the fourth book of Zommunist Invasion, because Koz is also a main character in that story. I thought I would end this episode with a little bit of historical fact. I did it with the Jesus episode where I talked about fact and fiction. And I was researching for this particular novella, I was researching communist propaganda slogans, because I thought, oh, this will be an interesting way to really build up his character and work in some really cool details. And propaganda, as we all know, it's presented in such a way that often becomes belief. So what I was specifically researching was communist slogans, and you're going to see some of them in this short story. So I'm just going to read some of them to you because I found them really interesting. And in some ways, we're all products of our environment, whatever that is. And in Cold War communist Russia, there was a very intense environment that was really set on producing people that thought and did and acted in very specific ways. So here's some interesting slogans for you. If you do pointless chat, you are helping a spying rat. I love this. I paraphrased it a little bit, but I do use it in the story. So basically, don't be gossiping or hanging out with your neighbors because you could be helping spies. I love it. Let's conquer the virgin blue. That's not very catchy, but apparently it was propaganda about farming around science. And one of the things they were trying to do, do research to improve soil. And apparently they also had some kind of project to genetically engineer ducks for cheaper meat. So these little things did make it into the story because it's so interesting. Oh, and they had propaganda flyers about smoking cigarettes because the government owns the factories where the cigarettes were made and they sold them. So they wanted everybody to smoke so that they could make more money. I found this fascinating. Here's another great one. To fly higher than all, farther than all, and faster than all. This was a goal of the government and the people. And this one is actually used quite a bit in the story because it really relates when you're talking about a scientist. Another great one I found was glory to Soviet science. I love that. So of course I've got a Soviet researcher, so he says this all the time, his whole life. Glory to Soviet science. Death to fascism. Never step backward. Never retreat from the fortress. A man is a friend, a comrade, and a brother to a man. Viva Motherland. I guess they use Spanish. I thought that was interesting. I used that one in my book. I decided not to use Spanish because I felt like that just confused things. So I changed it to long live the motherland, glory to the motherland. So I used that quite a bit in the book. Oh, and here's something else interesting. Not only did the Russian government encourage people to smoke, but they knew that alcohol made people happy. So they actually had these programs to try and get people cheap wine. Hello, I would have totally been on that. Especially sparkling wine. They specifically had government programs to make cheap champagne so they could get people liquored up and I guess keep them happy. So anyway, I found all this so fascinating. So much of it did make its way into the story. And I think this is a big, or actually I know this is a big part of what had me feeling such compassion because his character, Koz's character, he's a product of his environment. Like he's a product of being raised and having these sorts of thoughts hammered into him all the time, and he expresses them perfectly. He is the perfect comrade. He's the perfect subject of the motherland, ready to sacrifice everything for the betterment of his country, and that's what he's been taught to do. And, you know, all of us have our own programming and, you know, all that stuff. So anyway, it was a beautiful lesson in compassion and love, and I love the story. I love the darkness of it. It might be hard to read, but again, it's only a novella, so, you know, it's not a huge time investment. You're not going to be depressed for weeks, right? It's not a 1,000-page book or anything like that. And by the end of the story, there is some character evolution so that when you do pick up again with Koz in book 4, it's not going to be quite so dark. So anyway, this brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks for coming to hang out with me. I really appreciate it. If you ever have any questions, you can email them to me at hello@camillepeacock.com, and I will do my best to answer them either in the show or in a newsletter. So anyway, thank you for being here. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another show, and until then, I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye.